Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar where we are going to show how to break boundaries in pharmaceuticals with real-time power. Today, I'm going to moderate this webinar. My name is Marc Olivet. I am Strategy Director at AG Solution. I will be accompanied with Benson De Hill, one of our top MES consultants who specializes in integration, UNS, and real-time compliance and agility. He's going to be sharing some actionable insights to optimize pharma operations. During the whole webinar, you are going to receive some questions. You can send us all the time all your questions that you may have. We will collect them and shoot them at the end of the webinar. And we will also be during the webinar showing some poll questions that you can answer in real time. So to start with the agenda, we are going to start talking about the pains in the life science sector and pharmaceuticals especially. What are the pains, the challenges in their digital transformation, and how can we make a difference with real-time power? Okay, Benson is going to show you one of the use cases that we are working right now, and then we will go through the questions that you may have. So first of all, I'm going to introduce you very briefly what AG Solution is. We are a partner. We are a Industry 4.0 company, a consultant company that provides solutions for digital transformation and Industry 4.0. We are specialized in offering solutions that improve your operational excellence, foster your innovation, and ensure long-term sustainability. We are roughly a company of around 400 engineers and consultants. We were founded in 2007. We operate in all the, let's say, the OT landscape. We have 6 centers of expertise from the data collection up to data management, MES, and so on. We are present in all Western Europe, and we recently expanded to the United States. So if we can start with the webinar, with the content of the webinar, we will like to talk about what the challenges, how do we see the challenges in the pharmaceuticals and in the life science sector, and why we see that they are, in our opinion, they are transitioning to a 4.0 company. Whether it's from compliance, where they want to increase their level of compliance to optimize their audits, make it sustainable quality management, and operations where they want to make a more sustainable supply chain. And very often in the generics manufacturing, they want to increase margins due to pricing control, but also digital teams that work in life science, they want to use all their, let's say, the tech stack of the new solutions to improve efficiency, to gain efficiency and speed, and to use these solutions in all the value chain. But also, last but not least, R&D, which always aims at shortening the time to market, from drug development up to a commercialization of the drugs developed. So these are, let's say, the business drivers as we see them of why pharmaceuticals want to move to a 4.0 company. But after doing research and personal experience, we see that this is not obvious. This is not an obvious transition, okay? We've seen reports where more than 70% or on average 70% of digital transformation programs in the life science sectors fail, right? Many of them have been stalled after doing a considerable amount of investment, that these projects have, or these programs have been canceled or have been, just canceled. And very often what we see is that the problem was not just technology as such, right? So was more, on average, on more than 50% was due to a lack of methodology and cultural acceptance. Okay, so there we would like to raise the first poll. Okay, so what challenges are you facing in your digitalization journey? Is a poll. I hope poll appears. Is it struggling with compliance and regulatory requirements? Is it high cost and long timelines for validation processes? Is it digital transformation programs often fail or remain partially deployed? Or resistance or adoption difficulties from end users? So you have a multiple choice here. Wait a few seconds. Okay. So results show that 67% of respondents says that digital transformation programs often fail or remain partially deployed. That's correct. Where 42% there is a resistance or adoption difficulties from end users, and then high cost and long timelines for validation process at also 42%, almost half of the attendance. Only 17% said that they are struggling with compliance and regulatory requirements. Interesting. Okay, so the question that we would like to bring here to the table is, can we transition to a Pharma 4.0 using a holistic methodology, that we say it's not just technology, but it has to take technology, but also people, the value, so the business value provided, and also processes, okay? Can we have a methodology, or can we propose a methodology that encompasses all these 4 points? And then here I would like to introduce to Benson, who is going to give us a few more insights about this.
Thank you,
Benson.
Mark. So now that Mark has gone over some of the um, pain points, let's say, in the pharma industry, what I will do is show or explain the methodology at AG Solution that we follow to address those pain points. So this slide kind of shows the high-level overview. On the left, you can see the three main steps that are involved in the methodology. So it starts with assessing the current state, which is doing a mapping, and I'll explain in the next slides what those mappings contain. And based on those mappings of the current state, they will tell you where are we currently, and also we create a mapping for where do we want to go. Based on those two, we can start thinking about this kind of foundation of the digital roadmap, which technology will we use, which conventions will we follow in naming conventions, for example, and then we start making those decisions. We start kind of making these building blocks that we then can use in the third step, which is constructing the actual digital strategy, which will have the plan of where do we go and how do we reach this point. On the right, you also see those four aspects, the processes, the culture, the people, the technology. Those are four very, let's say, key aspects that are involved or are important in all three steps of this methodology. So they are interconnected, but they are very important to keep in mind in order to get a successful digital strategy. And it's also important to keep in mind, oftentimes companies or customers, they see a digital transformation as just a project, like something they order and it runs from, I don't know, January to June, just to say. And then when we reach June, when we reach the project deadline, we'll have a digital solution deployed, and that's it. But it's not like that. It's more like a journey. It's not just a project. It's something that, yeah, it's a strategy and a journey that you have to go along. And at the end, you have to review for any improvements. So it's like a continuous cycle, let's say. Um, And I'll zoom into the four aspects, starting with the processes. And here I come back to this mapping of the first step. So what we do is we first create this as-is mapping. So it's the BPC, the Business Process Consultancy, that will create those mappings. We follow the ISO 95 model to do them or to create them. And we touch on the functional model, physical model, activity model, data model, like those four we go through in the model. They will be part of it. And they will tell both the customer, but also us, what is the current state of the plant, of the enterprise, let's say. And then we create the same model, but then the 2B model. So where do we want to go? What does it look like? What do we want to digitalize? What do we use? Which technology and so on? Um, and so there is a small use case, so it might sound a bit theoretical. So just to touch here, there is the electronic batch records, just to show you something small. So it's a use case on first there was paper-driven operations with the batch record. It was a manual process, so manual data entry. It had compliance challenges. It was not real time because only at the end of the batch they had the paper with all the data on. And it was also just not efficient because they had to pass the paper to different people. So the solution was to do this mapping, the as-is and to-be mappings. Based on those mappings, we created some standardization and templates for one site, which could then be rolled out to multiple sites
Mm.
as well. And we also implemented this electronic batch record system so that it was not on paper anymore, and that the data entry can also be, let's
Mm.
say, automated.
But Benson, this looks a
Mhm.
little bit theoretical. Maybe you
Yeah,
can give a little bit more in detail. What are you talking about, the mappings and the
yeah,
business
exactly.
process?
So in the next slides, yeah, here I have an example of this as is mapping. So it's basically this what you would get. So you can see the ISO 95 layers and the different steps in the process. They are divided along those layers. So where did they happen? And in each step, we'll have this information of the activity name, the different activities that they do in a step, like the actual operations. We'll also see the application name, so which technology do they use in this step? Is it a manual entry or a digital? Is it something that's connected to some equipment, and so on? And so this is then the as-is mapping. We could also create here an example of the 2B mapping. So it looks very similar as the as is, but some of the steps might have moved a layer in the ISO 95 model. They might have become digital instead of manual. So there are some subtle changes, but this will be then, let's say, the basis of the digital strategy. It shows where do we want to go and where are we currently.
Yeah,
Um,
Benson, one question, because usually if we speak to people from operations, they may have already some mappings and they may say they already have it. So here the question is how what is the difference that they are proposing here?
Yeah. So what we do in creating these mappings, we follow a methodology. We go and interview the actual operators. Which actions do they do? Which applications do they use? And this way, by doing it, we make sure that there is no gaps in the design. Because if you end up with gaps, then at the end you'll realize, oh, but there is something here that we didn't think about that was not in the mapping, and then you have to redesign. You have to patch the gap basically, and that will bring extra costs. So by us doing it, will prevent gaps that might have been there in the mappings that the customers would already have. If you already have a mapping, that's also great. Like we can start from there, but we will still go and interview the operators and so on, just to make sure that it's a solid mapping. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And so the next aspect is the culture. So what we often see in with customers is that they have, of course, different departments. They have their process control team, they'll have their data team, their mom team, and each of those teams they will have their own roadmap and different, yeah. Those roadmaps they will be like standalone things oftentimes. And so each roadmap will have their own technology, their own people with their knowledge. And then in the end, those things have to be connected together, and you end up with these yeah, expensive connections because you need to validate all the connections and you need to make sure that everything is documented well. And so what we propose in the methodology here is to make sure that these roadmaps are aligned. And a, a way to do this, for example, is to initiate or to create some sort of governance board that overarches all these roadmaps. So this board would have members from each department, let's say, that have their own roadmap, but they will govern all the roadmaps, make sure that they are aligned and that they're using the same standards, that they're using technology that is compatible, and so on. And so that's something oftentimes that customers don't really think about. They just implement, and in the end, they need to connect and need to put the pieces together. And so this has some advantages like because you standardize everything, you also have standardized data access. You have better quality of data. If you do it properly, you can also start thinking about automatically creating assets in your data systems. Um, so yeah, this brings us to the second poll question. So here, the question is, how aligned are the roadmaps in your company? So roadmaps, for example, from automation, MES, and data. And the three options are roadmaps are separate but connected through custom interfaces or just interfaces. We try to align roadmaps, but there is no formal governance process. And then the third option is the governance board ensures that the roadmaps are fully aligned. And I'll just wait half a minute for the answers. Okay, I think we can close the poll. Let's see what the results say. So half of the people have separate roadmaps connected through interfaces. Um, Then 40% is saying we try to align the roadmaps, but there is no formal governance process. And then 1 or 10% says a governance board ensures all roadmaps are fully aligned. So yeah, those are interesting results. So yeah, I would recommend trying to align as much as possible because a process like that can alleviate some of the pain points that we discussed earlier. And I'll continue to the next aspect, which is the people. This is just a short slide because I think it makes sense for most of the people. It's just to emphasize the importance of it, that people are very important in a digital transformation. And with people, I don't just mean the business, but also the key users, the operators who actually have to use the changed solution, let's say. So it's important to also keep or also involve those people in the design process. So when we design new user interfaces, for example, it's important to already show the key users whether they like it or not, because they are the people who will have to use it. And in the end, if they say, I don't really like it because they were not involved in the design, yeah, then you have problems because you have to either adjust the solution or you have to create some, I don't know, you have to convince them to start using it, which is, it's better to just have them in the design process. And then finally, the technology layer. So here, what we see in the traditional architecture is that a lot of components, a lot of, let's say, technology is connected to each other with these point-to-point interfaces, which, each interface needs to be validated, then also needs to be documented. So a lot of time goes into here, all these interfaces, setting them up, maintaining them, validating them. And so what we propose, or is there a remark, Mark?
Yeah,
Something?
exactly. So I know from experience in projects that point-to-point connections can take around a big part of the budget. In some cases,
Mhm.
up to 80% of the whole project budget.
Yeah.
So just want to understand a little bit more. What are your suggestions?
Yeah, so exactly, like it's a pretty big pain point, all these connections, and something on the right side that now appeared is the unified namespace concept. So that's something that kind of yeah, takes care, or that goes around this point-to-point connection. With the unified namespace, we don't have everything scattered or distributed, but we have one central, let's say, space, broker, data broker called the unified namespace, where all the data sources connect to and also all the consumers. And the consumers will be able to just consume data from all data sources or whatever they have access to, without needing separate connections. And I'll come back to this slide later, but now I'll zoom into the unified namespace, the concept itself. So what is this unified namespace? It's basically an organized and centralized data broker. It's using MQTT as a protocol. So you can see it as an MQTT broker where all your data sources connect to, but also your consumers. And in MQTT, you can arrange your different data points as topics, and I'll show it in the next slide. So you can basically you can contextualize and create this tree structure of yeah, your different assets, your different sites and lines and so on. And you have, yeah, basically all your data there contextualized. So there is a data ops platform that is also connected to this unified namespace, which will take the raw data, it will transform it. It might apply some data cleaning even, and then it will publish the contextualized data into the unified namespace. And so it's important to know the UNS, it shows the current state. So it doesn't historize the data. It will just show you the latest data that's being published. But what you can do is connect an historian, for example, to the unified namespace so that the historian consumes data in the UNS and historizes it. So by default, like just yeah, the bare bone UNS, it doesn't historize any data, but there is possibilities. And also you might think, because that's oftentimes what people think if they hear about the unified namespace, that we're abandoning modeling standards such as ISO 95, because in ISO 95 you have the different layers, the constraint that data can only move to the adjacent layer. And here we have all the layers basically together in one space. So yeah, we're not abandoning the ISO 95 standard, but what we're doing is just relaxing some of the constraints within ISO 95, but we're still following or using the standard. And then finally, what is it not? You can also not just buy it off the shelf like a product. I install the broker and I have the unified namespace. It also doesn't work like that because the unified namespace, it also needs this data ops tool with the templates, with the right modeling of the data before you can actually get a unified namespace. And I'll just show you here an example. Let me take the pointer. So as you can see on the right, you see an example topic structure of yeah, of the unified namespace. So it's following the S88 naming standard. So it starts with the enterprise and it goes to the site area, and so it drills down. And then here in the line, you have your MES data and also edge data, ERP data. So you have data from different sources together here. And so yeah, this is now for line one. Um, all of these points that you see here contain data. And so it's the current, let's say, real-time yeah, data value of this measurement, for example. You might think, yeah, I have my ERP data here, my MES data. If somebody connects to it, he can just see everything here, but it's not true. There is authorization also in the unified namespace, so you can make sure that yeah, the clients, the users who connect to it, they only see what they need to see. And so you can use role-based access. You can connect it to Active Directory groups, for example, so that some people can only see ERP data, some can only see MES data, or combination. And so, as you can see here, the data is now kind of contextualized because you have it in this tree structure and it tells you where is the data coming from. Is it line one from MES? So it's still structured properly. And what we also have, it's the data ops tool that's doing this. So it's taking data from the source, structuring it, and then publishing it here in this tree structure. And in this data ops tool, you can use templatization so that we can just reuse assets whenever a new asset is added, for example. And also data cleaning is possible in this data ops tool so that all the consumers, they will already have the clean data. So each consumer will not have to do their own data cleaning, can be done close to the source so that whenever it enters the UNS, it's already there, yeah, clean. And it's important to note that all of this, the whole unified namespace, it only works properly whenever you have a proper digital strategy, when you have a solid strategy and a solid governance process. Because if you don't have it, then this tree structure, it will not look as nice here, as structured, as organized. And so it's really important. And that's why we also mentioned the first slides to have an actual proper idea of what your process looks like in order to make steps towards this unified namespace. And so I'll come back now to this slide. Let me just take away the pointer. And so going back to the original slide, so this unified namespace in comparison with the traditional architecture, it reduces the complexity because now you don't have all these point-to-point connections. You just have the connection from the source to the unified namespace and then from unified namespace to the consumer. And also here, the validation is simplified because now it's only a two-step validation. It's the validation between the source and UNS, and then UNS to the consumer. And it's showing real-time data as well.
So sorry,
Sorry.
Benson, just
Mhm.
to go back on this, but what you're saying is that validation would be simplified, right? This is
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, because now it's a two-step validation process now. And also because you model your data, you have these templates, you have the data, let's say, in a standard way. You can also reuse components from already validated parts in your new validation. So the validation procedure itself also goes easier because you already have things that look like it, let's say.
okay. Thank you.
And then finally, I will show a small demo video of a unified namespace where we will add a new asset and we'll see how this asset is automatically added to our unified namespace and also in the historian. So here, what you see is a MQTT client. So it's connected to the unified namespace. You can see this kind of similar topic structure as in the screenshot earlier. So we have here a line 1, R001, which is the reactor. And so this reactor has edge data. And I think here, yeah, here we have our Aveva Pi historian, which is also connected to the unified namespace. And we have a connector in between what that will monitor the unified namespace. Whenever there is a new topic in the namespace, it will add it here in AF, in the asset framework. So you can see here these elements, they have the same naming or the same structure as originally in the unified namespace. And so here the points or the data points of the UNS are being historized yeah, in our historian here. So you can see it's also line 1, reactor R001, and then we have the definitions which contain metadata of the measurements, and then we have edge which will contain the actual process data. And now as a demo, we'll go to the Kepler, so the data source. And what we will do is we have line 1 currently with all these measurements. We will add a new line and we'll just here as a demo copy some measurements over from line 1 to 2 just to make it, yeah, let's say quickly add a new line. And because we have this model of a line, we know what the line asset looks like. What will now happen is that line 2 will automatically be picked up by the data ops tool and will automatically be published into the unified namespace. So we'll now see these new measurements that we added here. If we go to the MQTT client, we'll see that line number 2 will be added here. So you see here. And so also these measurements, both the definitions, so the metadata of the measurements, as the process data is now being automatically published into the unified namespace. And then to go a bit further, if we go look in PyAF, we can see that also here, line number 2 has been automatically added and also is automatically being historized now, all the new data that we have added. And so this is then in contrast to the traditional approach where these things would have had to be made manually. So somebody, a configurator of the Pi system would have had to ask somebody from automation, what are the new tags that you have added? What are the instrument tags? What are the names and other parameters? In order to then configure those new tags, each of them here separately in Pi. And now instead, all the metadata of the measurements and the process data itself is being published in the UNS. We know in the data ops tool what these models look like. And so these models are then used to just automatically pick it up and also here start historizing them. So it saves a lot of manual time yeah, in this just brief demo. And I think this was, let me just, the next slide. Yeah. So to conclude, what I think the main message here of this webinar is that a digital strategy, you can go very far with it, but you need to you need to design it very carefully and you need to follow the right methodology in order to make this a success story. And part of this methodology is this mapping, which is really the foundation. So it's to start where, with this mapping of what does it look like right now and where do we want to go. And once you have this solid foundation, you can start thinking about these very new concepts like unified namespace. And so this, by doing it this way properly, you can, prevent expensive discrete connections, which are one of the pain points. These also, it's a lot more scalable. So like adding assets will become easier. Validating new assets will also become easier because you have this model of the asset and you can reuse things from other validation procedures. And it's also showing you real-time data. So you don't, you're not, you don't have to use this paper anymore or slow data. You can have everything in real time. So I think, this is the conclusion. So now we can move over to the Q&A part. You're on mute, Mark.
Thank you very much, Benson. So now we will open with questions. There is already a few. So first one, how would you deal with LIMS or MES data in a historical way? You can publish it with the right context into the broker, but where does the contextualized history live? Okay, that's a tricky question. Let's say that you have context on your UNS, okay, because it may be provided by MQTT or by another one. You might have a hierarchy, but then your historical there needs to be, let's say, a parallel instance with historical data which is also let's say contextualized, okay, because many of your use cases will be many of your data use cases will need historical data, not just real time. Okay, next question. You say, okay, in the image on slide 28, there is no arrow. So when you are showing you the UNS, Benson, there is no arrow between components. For example, a connection between a PLC and historian. It's a little bit the same question. Is it possible to have those connected and have them to connect the UNS as well? Yes.
Right. Yeah, so basically the question is about you have these, let's say PLC is not connected to historian anymore, for example. So yeah, in this case, it shows, let's say, the ideal environment, but it's still possible to have custom connections between different components. It will require some additional firewall rules and those things. But yeah, there is some use cases where it might be, let's say, possible or might make sense to have that. For example, in PLC, if you really want your data in actual real time, like directly from the PLCs, it makes sense to have a custom connection from PLC to whatever where you want it. But yeah, it's not that the UNS does add that much delay to the whole
Mm.
the whole pipeline. But yeah, no, some cases it makes sense.
Well, there is an interesting question now. Is the UNS made on Aussie Pi or Aviva Pi? Well, here I would say you could, but the problem is that it's not open upwards, Aussie Pi. The you could create a hierarchy on the contextualization, but it's not that open. So here what we propose is, well, and so maybe you can show it, but it's an MQTT broker that makes this, let's say,
Yeah.
this hierarchy, which in the end it's like Benson showed. I think it's automatically replicated. No, the hierarchy is replicated. You
Hmm.
create a line, and then on Aussie Pi, it's also there is also a line with
Yeah.
its hierarchy.
So there is in OzzyPi or AvevaPi, there is an Sparkplug B connector which will do that. So it will connect to the MQTT broker. Something that is also some companies are also thinking of is vendor locking that they want to prevent. And this unified namespace, let me maybe just go to the slide here. The concept of vendor locking can also be prevented with the unified namespace because here you basically have the brokers, the MQTT brokers, which can be, for example, open source brokers or just HiveMQ or some other. But it's very easy to just switch the brokers. So in case you're not happy anymore with broker A, you can just install a new one. And it's like UNS consists of these components that you can just change out and switch of vendors. So you're not with Aveva Pi, for example, if you have everything in Pi, you rely on Aveva and their licensing to have it basically. But here in UNS, you can take out components and switch them by others. So that prevents that is another one of the advantages.
Okay, there is another question. What about manufacturing sites and PLCs? Well, manufacturing site machines and PLCs, where they are different. Therefore, they will arrive in Kepware in very different ways and different data available. How would you keep UNS in this condition? Right, so you have different machines connecting to different PLCs. How do you keep a UNS, no, a unified namespace in this condition?
Yeah, so what I'm thinking is the data ops tool that is connected to the unified namespace will take care of those different, let's say, structures or yeah, the different data sources. So the data ops tool will connect, yeah, or it will take the raw data and transform it into this model, in the standard model, before it's being published to the UNS. And this also relates to one of the questions, whether it can handle the, for example, Siemens PCS7 data. So sometimes it's possible that the sources that they do not speak MQTT because in the UNS it's all MQTT, and this data ops tools also serve as a purpose to translate these protocols. So in case your data source doesn't talk MQTT, it's not a big problem because you can still connect it through, for example, OPC UA to the data ops tool. Which will then still take the raw data, transform it, clean it maybe, and then also publish it as MQTT. So it's possible to translate those protocols, and then for the different data, or let's say, yeah, input data formats, that's also what the data ops tool does. So you define all the templates there, all the models there, and then it will just take the models and apply them to the raw data.
Okay. Another question. Can UNS handle PCS7 batch, schematic batch data?
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. So yeah, you can have your data ops tool translate the protocols in case that there is no MQTT available in the data source. So it can handle those. Yeah.
Interesting question here. What's the adoption rate by MES, LIMS, ERP, historian vendors of the UNS concept? That's an interesting one. Let's say it's starting, but not all of them, probably for interest reasons, are have an answer yet to this UNS concept. Although we see that it's starting since already a year, and it's coming more and more. Of course, this is based on appreciations, but when you talk to the different vendors, they are discussing it internally. Another question: if you could eliminate one challenge in your current MES or MOM implementation, what would it be and why?
I think if I can answer it, the challenges that we see and ideally would be eliminated is the gaps in design. That's something from my experience that can be very painful because sometimes you implement something, you think you're actually ready, you have the solution ready, and then the customer comes back and says, yeah, but there is something that we were not thinking about. And then, yeah, an example is something that I stumbled upon was there was this Excel file. So yeah, there was the Excel file of an operator that he was using for his daily things, but this Excel file was not taken into the design. And then in the end, we ended up with, yeah, the solution being deployed, but then it was suddenly like, what do I do now with my Excel file? And then the customer was like, what Excel file do you mean? And so, yeah, there was this Excel file that we did not take into account. So those kind of challenges would be nice to eliminate. And also here in our methodology, by having this mapping, a solid mapping in the beginning, it prevents those challenges, those gaps basically. So yeah.
Uh, there is one last question. Many shop floor devices do not support MQTT, especially legacy systems. How do you ingest data from those systems in the UNS?
Yeah. So also here, it depends on which protocol it talks, but the data ops tools that are commonly available, they usually have a broad range, like really wide range of protocols that they support. So how that can be, let's say, tackled is by having the devices, the legacy devices connect to the the DevOps platform, and then yeah, the platform will translate it from the legacy protocol to MQTT. So, yeah.
Mhm. Okay, and another question. Can BI tools like Power BI consume data from UNS directly, or do you need the SQL in between?
No, they can connect to MQTT, and so you can have Power BI as a consumer using MQTT connect directly to the unified namespace, and then you can choose which topics that you pull from the unified namespace and then put in your BI tools. Yeah.
Okay, if there are no more questions, nope, looks like there are no more questions. Okay, thank you very much for all those attending. Thank you very much, Benson.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope you learned something. So yeah.
Yeah, Chuck, go to the info slide.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want more info, you can contact
Right.
us. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed and learned something, and hope to hear you from you very soon. Bye bye.